When you buy a plugin, do you own it for life? What happens if you change your computer or operating system and suddenly it doesn't work anymore? Are you going to face some unexpected costs from plugins that you already paid for? Well, I found myself thinking about this, so I decided to do some research with a whole bunch of different plugin companies, and I want to share my findings with you. Why don't you join me today? If you're doing any form of mixing in a computer, then you know third-party plugins are like candy. There's just so many different types, and they're a lot of fun. And the truth is, some really great plugin companies out there that add real value to the mixing experience. But when you start owning plugins and realize that the different plugin companies have different license policies, that might mean you have to shell out for the plugin that you already paid for. So I found myself in that situation recently because I just migrated my studio to the new Apple Mac Studio, and some of my software worked and some of it didn't. And I found myself dealing with this. So I decided to check out as many plugin companies as I could. I haven't got them all here, but I do have 11. Some of them I know personally through my YouTube channel. Some of them I'm just a customer. I sent customer service emails to them. Some of them I've never used before, but they were on the list of some of the top 10 plugin companies. So I've got my list of 11. It was a bit bigger, but 11 is a good place to start. And I'm going to compare their license policies. Now, there's something that I want to say off the top that I think is important to understand. And if you do understand this, I think it's important for you to know that I understand this. Is that developing software is complicated. You know, it takes engineering skills, depending on the platform that you're developing for, or if you're developing for multiple platforms. Now, most of us home studio guys are probably on a Windows PC or on a Mac. So those are two independent platforms right there. And plugins, which are kind of down the food chain because, you know, the DAWs are developed for the particular operating system, but then the plugins have to sit in the host, which is the DAW. So they're kind of a couple of steps down in the food chain. But there's always changes that happen to the DAWs, that happen to the operating systems, and that involves maintenance of their inventory of plugins. Now, depending on their capacity to keep up with those changes, coding is a laborious task. It does cost money. So whether or not these companies want to pass those savings on to their existing customers or just keep compliant so they can continue selling their products. And in some cases, some of the companies look at it as opportunities to make some more money. So I want to sort of compare all of those. Now, there is this bit of a stigma attached to software because let's face it, if you figure out that formula, you write the code once, you can replicate that as many times as you want, as long as people are willing to buy it. In the physical world, obviously, there's the cost of manufacturing and distribution. Now, let's think about it. This guitar. Now, I paid for this guitar, and then over the years, I had to expect there was going to be some additional costs for it, right? I put strings on it. I even changed the pickups. That was a few $100s. So just owning something in the physical world doesn't mean we're not going to incur costs. Think of a car. You never really own a car now, do you? So anyways, there are costs sometimes and sometimes they're not. And I want to sort of look through that and make some comparisons. Now, what I've done is I've created 4 categories and I've taken the 11 plugin companies and put them in the different categories. Sometimes they straddle the categories. If you disagree with any of them, I'm always happy to get into a hot debate in the comment section. So don't hesitate to let me know your thoughts. All right, let's dive into all of this. So what I've done is I created this infographic and I plotted all of the different plugin companies into different categories. The categories were defined based on my perception of what each company's main thrust of revenue was. We've got subscription, we've got what I call individual, I'll clarify these in a minute, versions, and upgrade. So Slate Digital, subscription company, no secret there, through companies like United Plugins and Fuse Audio Labs. Melda, we've got Izotope, Fabfilter on the upgrade category. And again, I'll clarify that in a second. Look, we got Waves straddling almost all the categories, trying to find money from everybody. But we'll discuss that in a second. So let's start with Waves, since I just mentioned them. Actually, changing my mind. Let's leave Waves for a little bit later. Let's start with Slate Digital. Now, as far as I understand, Slate is the pioneer of the plugin rental. And it's a simple concept. You pay a monthly fee, you get access to all the plugins they have to offer. And if you stop paying, you lose access to the plugins. Slate is not shy about this policy. This is a business model that they developed and seems to be doing quite well for them. They've got a whole ecosystem of hardware, things that talk together, and it's a recurring revenue model. They market their products really, really well. And from the outside looking in, it looks like they're doing pretty good. But understand when you're buying their plugins, it is a rental. So as long as you keep paying, you can keep using their plugins. And if you decide you want to stop your subscription, well, you're going to lose access to your plugin. So hopefully you finished all your projects and you bounce them out because you're no longer going to have any access. Now, you could turn it off, you can turn it on. As far as I know, there's no limitations there. So if you happen to go dark for a while, need to subscribe again, you'll get access to those plugins again. But at no point do you own these plugins. You can only get access to them when you're in their subscription model. Now, there is an opportunity to buy their plugins. If you dig really, really deep onto the product pages, you'll see an options to buy what's called a perpetual license. Now, a perpetual license implies you're buying a particular version of that software. So there's no guarantees of support beyond that version. So if they move on to another version, you bought a perpetual. Again, no guarantees that you're going to get support on that plugin. Now, I did reach out to Slate through their customer service. It's been about 4 days since I did that, now that I'm shooting this video, and at this point, they haven't responded to me. So it was a customer inquiry. I didn't say I was doing a video, and nobody responded to me. So is what it is. But you rent the plugins, you turn off the taps, and you lose access to the plugins. And if you're a professional mixer and you've got monthly expenditures, it's cost of doing business, and that's the way they look at it. Now, the next company in our list here is Plugin Alliance. Now, if you notice here in my graph, they're straddling the individual category. Now, I define individual as plugin companies that develop individual plugins. And when those plugins are developed, they're kind of done. And aside from perhaps some maintenance updates or any bug fixes, they're not looking to revisit those plugins. They're looking to continually build their inventory. You buy one-offs, you can buy bundles, but those plugins are individual plugins. I've got a few companies in this category. Now, Plugin Alliance has also gotten into the subscription model, and it's a good comparison with Slate Digital. Clearly, they saw a revenue opportunity there, but they do it a bit differently. I know there's a newer package right now where you pay a fee. I think it's about $29 a month, and then every month for $1, you can buy virtually any plugin in their inventory. So these are plugins at full price, or sometimes from $100 to $300-$400 on sale, maybe $25, $40, $50, $100, but for $1 you can buy a plugin, and you continue your subscription along. In 1 year you can actually own 12 different plugins. It's not a bad deal, and I'm not a big fan of a subscription model personally, but they also have another package, and if I understand it correctly, you sort of earn credits. So for example, and it's almost dollar for dollar, so let's say you do a rental or the monthly subscription for a year, you spend about, let's say, $250 and earn about the same $250 in credits that you can use towards the purchase of your plugins. And that's actually a pretty good system, because if you're not sure what you want, well, you get access to the entire library for a year, figure out which plugins you're using the most, and at the end you have a $250 credit. And if you watch their sales, which Plugin Alliance quite often has, and they've got all sorts of plugins. They market their own brand, brainworx, as well as they represent other developers who sell their plugins under the Plugin Alliance umbrella. But for $250, if you catch the sales, you could end up with 4, 5, 6 plugins. So it's a pretty good deal. And I think it's a good feel-good gesture from Plugin Alliance. I mean, the recurring revenue model, it's a big one for companies that can get into it. But with Slate, when you turn off the taps, you have nothing to show for it other than the experience and the work that you've done using Slate. But with Plugin Alliance, you actually get to keep some plugins at the end. So I think that's a really, really fair model. And if I was looking to do a subscription model, I certainly would consider that one, because I just love the feel-good element to just, what's it to the company, right? It doesn't cost them anything. Maybe they'll lose me as a subscription customer, but I'm a satisfied customer, and I'll certainly go back when I need some more plugins. So I definitely like that business model a lot. Now, continuing the theme of the individual category, we've got a couple of my favorite companies I've had the pleasure to deal with here on my channel, and that's United Plugins and Fuse Audio Labs. Now, the two of them have a very similar philosophy in that in this class of what I call individual plugins, they develop a plugin, and yeah, they'll do bug fixes and things like that, and as necessary. But it seems that their strategy is just to continually grow their inventory of plugins. Now, United Plugins is kind of sort of similar to what Plugin Alliance does, where you have United Plugins as an umbrella company representing a few different studios that are developing plugins. And they're all under sort of the same methodology, where basically upgrades are free for life. They don't charge for service or maintenance updates. For example, M1 is a big one if you're a Mac user. That was a big thing in the industry, that plugin companies had to get compliant, so these plugins would continue to work on the new Macs.
Rather than harassing people who have already supported us, we focus on creating more cool products and finding new users. And only those users that are happy with the arrangement and support will bring their friends aboard.
And if you follow United Plugins, actually, because whenever they release a plugin, they actually offer really serious discounts, sometimes as high as 85%. For the first couple of weeks or a month or so when it first comes out. So if you like United Plugins, you got to pay attention, because you can get the plugin really cheap. And then their philosophy is not to charge you any more money down the road, just for compliance or maintenance updates and things like that, they want to sell you new plugins. And I think that's a very fair model, and I really appreciate that. Fuse Audio Labs is very much the same way. They're very focused on individual plugins. They sort of develop a product, and then they sort of add it to the inventory, and unless it needs some maintenance or a bug fix, of course, they're taking care of those. But Fuse Audio Labs is a good example of that feel good that customers feel in using those products. Those who use Fuse Audio Labs plugins are huge fans of the company, and Ray, who's developing the plugins himself. I know so many people who are fans of the company and are certainly very loyal just because they get value. And I'll say that Fuse Audio Labs could probably charge a lot more for their plugins than they are. And they currently don't charge, again, for maintenance updates, and big ones like the M1 is a big one. So two companies that develop plugins, sort of those individual plugins, kind of done with it, move on to the next plugin, and they take care of the updates, and you can have peace of mind knowing that you don't have to pay again. Now, I'm going to put an asterisk beside all of the companies who do that, because all of them say, for now. I mean, what's going to happen 5-10 years from now? What happens if the entire OS ecosystems, Mac changes it up so drastically that they're forced into something completely different? None of them have tea leaves who can read the future. So, there's going to be a little asterisk there. We don't know what's going to happen with the big computer companies and, the developers of the operating systems. But that's not something these plugin companies are in control of, which is why there will be that little asterisk beside all of their license terms, especially if they're not charging for updates. So next, I've got a couple more companies in the individual category, Softube and Eventide. Now, these are two companies I have less experience with. I've used a couple of Softube plugins that were part of some hardware bundles or bundled in with some hardware that I bought, and Eventide, which I know they've got some pretty bangers that have come out recently, but personally I haven't had a chance to use them. But I wanted to include them on this list because I know they're both popular companies. Now, I reached out to both of them, sending customer service inquiries, and I did get responses from both of them. So let's start off with Softube.
An upgrade is different from an update. Our upgrades, legacy to MK2, that basically give you another product, are paid for. During my 10-ish years at Softube, no updates have been paid. I can't promise that normal updates will be free forever, as there might be some significant leap coming down the road. However, this isn't likely in the foreseeable future.
So they're clearly distinguishing the difference between an update, sort of maintenance updates, and if there's any significant upgrade to a plugin where they're adding new features to the plugin, where they're going to consider that paid. Now, whether or not they have an upgrade path for existing customers, I'll assume they do. That wasn't made clear in this email. But if you are using a plugin and they make any serious upgrades to the plugin, you can expect to have to pay for new features, which I don't think is unfair. And the fact that they will support existing plugins and keep them working with OS updates and things like that gives you some security that they're just there updating their plugins to make sure that they work, and they're not trying to gouge their customers and just get some money and claw back money just because they had to do a maintenance update. So I sent a similar email to Eventide just to find out their license policies, and this is what they wrote.
We do not charge for future updates of plugins for compatibility purposes. For example, we recently updated all of our plugins to work natively on M1 systems.
So if you're migrating to a new computer and you'll know that they've maintained compliance with the newest machines, then you can have confidence to know that you can download the latest version of a plugin that you already paid for and know that it'll work on your new system. And again, I think that's really fair, assuming that they're making new products and that's where their revenue is going to be. I think, again, it's a really, really fair model and absolutely nothing to complain about. So Waves also straddles the individual category. In fact, that's how I really knew about Waves. All those $29 sales, I was picking them off one at a time until I upgraded to a bundle. So let's talk about Waves now. Actually, let's not talk about Waves. We're going to hang on to Waves. We'll come to that in a second. But let's move over to the next category and what I call versions. Now, by versions, this is when a company takes a look at all of the plugins in their inventory, and they all fall under a version number. Like Melda, for example, not too long ago, at least at the time of the taping of this video, they released V15 or version 15, and that's where every single plugin in their inventory got some kind of update, whether it was compatibility, whether some upgrades to the GUI, and in some cases even added functionality. Now, MeldaProduction has a policy of free updates for life.
It's logical. Although it is easy to charge for each update, we feel the free update attitude is more straightforward. It eases the life of the customer and ours as well.
I have to say that's probably one of the best guarantees in the business. If you own one MeldaProduction plugin or you own the whole suite, when they do a version update, you're going to get a lot of new features and ensuring compatibility with newer systems and things like that. And honestly, I don't think many people can compete with that. Now, I hope they can continue that. And as I said, that asterisk, I mean, if something changes in the future, We don't know what the landscape is going to look like, so software companies might have to adjust, but it's a really, really great policy. Certainly a feel-good moment for your customers when they pay for that plugin once and they know that they're taken care of going forward. You can't complain about that. Now, the second company in the versions category is Soundtoys. Now, again, you can buy their plugins individually, much like Melda. You're not like buying them, but they also look at their suite of plugins as a version. Currently, they're at Soundtoys 5, and I sent an email to Soundtoys, and they gave me quite a detailed response. So let me share that with you.
As long as we're supporting Soundtoys 5 products, your licenses will work and your plugins will receive updates, bug fixes, and compatibility updates. With that in mind, we're not looking to transition to a Soundtoys 6 line anytime soon. We just spent a major amount of time the last year creating a free update for all Soundtoys 5 users for native M1 compatibility. In the distant future, and most likely when we develop and come out with a Soundtoys 6, then support for Soundtoys 5 products will be dropped or phased out. We still have plenty of users who are running V4 products on special legacy systems that we offer as much support as we can.
So right now, if you're an owner of Soundtoys 5 and you want to jump into the Mac Studio just like me, know that they've moved everything forward and it's not going to cost you a penny. Now, once they go to Soundtoys 6, there's going to be limited support for the previous version. Now, if you notice what he said legacy, which means anyone who's running version 4 of their plugins didn't get the M1 update. Now, he didn't actually say that, but he made clear that it was legacy. Now, something's important to note, and again, I don't want to slam Soundtoys, but there's only so much companies can do in keeping legacy versions of software compliant, because they're spending all this time to develop the new version. What's the point of spending all that time on an older version? It becomes the new version. So in this case, they're giving you all the updates they can while that version is current, but once they move on to the next one, I assume they'll have an upgrade path for existing customers. He didn't talk about that, but that would be a fair thing to do. But in terms of support, they're giving as much support as they can. So that sounds like it would be technical support, but they're not going to provide M1 compatibility for legacy versions of their software. And that's how Soundtoys manage it. And again, it's fair. They're spending all that time and they're offering new products. Hopefully with Soundtoys 6, there'll just be a lot of new features. So if you do have to pay for those upgrades, again, remember that feel-good feeling you want to get. That's something that I'm sure Soundtoys would work hard to provide their existing customers. So if you haven't figured out by now, I'm clearly leaving waves for the end. So let's move into the next category that I call upgrade. And I've got two companies in this category, Izotope and Fabfilter. Now, if you're familiar with those two companies, they develop products that they will release as new versions a year or two down the line, like Pro Q3, Saturn 2, looking on the Izotope side, Ozone 9, RX 9, Neutron 3. So they'll re-release the same product, but they'll add more features into it. Now, I sent emails to both companies and I got a response from both of them. So let's check those out. Fabfilter wrote,
when we release a new major version of a plugin, we will always keep supporting the old version for a considerable amount of time. For example, Pro Q2 and Pro L1, which have been replaced by newer versions for quite some years now, are still being included in our general updates, including native M1 support, and will be so for as long as it's possible. Especially popular plugins like Pro Q3 will remain supported for as long as we can, even after a new major version will be released.
The fact that they're still supporting legacy versions of the software is actually quite amazing, because companies can really sort of, just wipe their hands and move on to the next version. But the fact that they're still supporting older versions, including M1 updates, is pretty unusual in the industry. I mean, obviously the companies that are doing it not charging you, but when they upgrade to a new version of any of their plugins, these are brand new plugins. It contains the functionality that you had before, but adds a whole assortment of new features. And I've actually covered some releases from Fabfilter, and just looking at what's new with each plugin, it's a lot of stuff. And there are upgrade paths if you're an existing owner, so you'll get the new product cheaper. But if you bought a plugin and you're hanging on to Pro Q3 or one of the older plugins that they mentioned, and the fact that they're still supporting them, that's quite amazing. And, Fabfilter products are not cheap, but the fact that, you've got some security there that they're supporting their plugins is super awesome. And they're not asking you for any more money. They're only going to charge you when they give you a new version of the plugin. And as an existing customer, you will get a discount. And I think that's absolutely a fair business model. Now, I also got a response from Izotope, so let's check that out.
Current products are supported with the newest OS. This is something we work to ensure. However, as new versions of our products come out, we cannot guarantee older legacy versions will stay up to date or be compatible with a newer OS as quickly as our current. But yes, we don't have a specific guarantee policy that ensures OS compatibility for older, discontinued versions. We do our best to honor it though.
So you can see how that policy is slightly different than Fabfilter, where they do their best, but they don't guarantee compatibility with legacy versions of the software. Now, again, as an Izotope customer myself, there's a lot of work that goes into those plugins. I mean, they're top shelf plugins, and things like Ozone, it's not a plugin, it's a suite of tools. And Izotope has very fair upgrade paths. But if you are an Izotope customer and you're sitting on a legacy version of the software, you're going to have to expect at some point they're going to jump off and they're going to put all their attention into the new software. You can't fault the companies for that. If Fabfilter has the wherewithal, maybe their products are coded a specific way that it's still cost effective to do that. But these are two totally different products, right? Pro Q3 is a very sophisticated EQ, but it is just an EQ. Ozone 9 is a whole suite of tools. While there is a cost to upgrade to the new versions, I've always found it fair because you just get a lot of value in return. And when you're spending your money, if you feel like you're getting a lot of value for that, well then, again, that feel-good moment, something I always look for when I buy products, is definitely evident in both Fabfilter and Izotope.
When you purchase a full Waves license, you get a permanent authorization for the version you purchased. In order to update your license for compatibility with your new system, I would suggest reviewing Waves update plan coverage for all of your licenses currently out of coverage. This will come out to $240 and extend your coverage a year from the date of registration.
And now finally we've arrived at Waves, and I've kind of reserved Waves for the end because I have a little bit to say about them. Now, this is not a bash Waves video by any stretch. I absolutely love the plugins that they offer. When I started my home studio journey, I bought lots of Waves plugins on the strength of those $29 sales. Now, I didn't know exactly what I was buying, and I wish someone had told me. Would it have made a difference? Maybe a little bit. But here's the thing. That perpetual license, you're buying one version of a plugin. Now, Waves does straddle 3 different categories and a little bit into the 4th one where they have a couple of plugins that saw some updates, but they're the individual plugin company that I knew from the beginning. I want a compressor, I want a SSL channel strip, picking off all those individuals, and suddenly I have a lot, and there was an upgrade to a bundle. I went all the way up to Diamond, and but based on these individual plugins that I was interested in. They do have a subscription model, which is pretty reasonable in terms of compared to Slate, and they have a couple of different packages depending on how many plugins you want access to. Similar model to Slate. When you cut it off, that's the end of your access. And but they are the Ultimate Versions company, but different than the other 2 companies that I mentioned, because in this case you're buying a version of that plugin. In my case, I bought version 9 and 10. When I upgraded my studio here to the new Apple Mac Studio using Wave Central to install my plugins, it told me it can't do it. It would not install version 9 and 10 because it said it's not compatible. Now, there is a workaround method. I want to talk about that in this video, but they tried to block me from installing them because they want me to upgrade. And just to get compatibility with the new OS, I have to buy a Waves update plan. At my level, that's about $250 for 1 year of support, which will lapse again in 1 year. Now, it'll make me current until I change again. But I have to say, I don't love that. And again, this is not criticizing Waves completely because I love their plugins. I mean, HComp, HDelay, F6, Chef's Omnichannel, these are staples in my projects. But I hate the fact that I have to pay for something and not get value back, because last I checked, Waves is not adding any new features to the plugins. There may be some under the hood things. I know they've done some GUI updates for some of the really old plugins. They've made things, resizable, but not like, Pro Q3 where they're putting, 20, 30, 40, 50 new features into a plugin. You're basically getting the same plugin again. You're just paying for the newer version, in this case, just to install them on my new computer. And I don't feel good about that. It's like I hand over that money and it's like, what did I just get? I just got compliance. I didn't get anything new. I'm not interested in these value adds like their courses and these, video support and stuff. It's just not something I'm personally interested in. So I'm not getting any value. Waves is forcing me to pay for my plugins all over again. And they're trying to block me from installing older versions because they want the revenue. Now, I don't know if Waves has hit a certain saturation point. They are the biggest company. They are the pioneers of audio plugins. Maybe they've hit that saturation point and they have to go back to their customers to sustain a revenue for this company. Maybe they're not growing enough. I don't know. I'm not privy to that information. But their policy is to find revenue wherever they can. They're renting. They're doing the individual plugins and bundles. They've got their versions, which you gotta, which is a perpetual license in this case. So they have a lot of different ways to find revenue. And listen, businesses, that's what they do, and you can't hold a grudge at them for that. But you have to decide as a consumer if you feel good about that. I don't feel good about buying a plugin that I've already purchased unless I'm going to get some new features. And I think it's a bug in the system. And in this day and age, with all the competition out there, look at all the companies that I shared with you today. Pretty much all of them are offering maintenance fixes for no charge. And the general consensus is if it's a new product, then there will be an upgrade cost to get that plugin. But with Waves, it's a year support. And if you want to just have compatibility with your OS, you're going to have to pay for the Waves update plan. Just something that you need to know. Well, there's my look at licensing for plugins. I certainly hope you found this helpful. If you're just getting into the game and you're looking to purchase plugins, you know what? It helps to know what you're buying, and that really is the purpose of this video. Perhaps you're looking to expand your library. I really like the companies that really look out for their customers. I don't begrudge any company in trying to make money because business is difficult and you got to get money where you can. But those companies that leave you that sort of feel-good feeling after purchasing their plugins, I think are really deserving of my money. That's kind of the way I look at it. And I appreciate there are opportunities where they could charge us and they choose not to. And their focus is just making more great products and finding more and more customers. And those are the companies that I personally would like to deal with going into the future. That's just me. But hopefully I provided you a resource here. If I've missed any companies that you'd like me to do some research on, if I get a big enough list and there's enough interest, I would consider doing that. Just let me know in the comments. Now, if you did like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you want to do a deeper dive with me, I'm on Patreon. I have affiliate links. All that information is in the description. Make sure to check it out. But the most important thing is to check out another video. I've got one waiting for you right here. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. I look forward to seeing you again in another video.